guys, welcome back to my channel. It's been a minute. I had some midterms for my summer semester. I kind of had to put YouTube on the hiatus for a second because school comes first, but I'm trying hard to get more long form videos out, and today I'm going to be doing a Q&A. I had you guys send in some questions from Instagram, and a lot of them are about PT school, so let's get into it. Okay, this first question is kind of funny. How much of undergrad physics do you use in PT school? None. Literally none. I think the only time I've really had a little bit of physics was in my electrophysiology class, but again, it wasn't too terrible. And then I did have some in my kinesiology class where we were talking about like lever arms and like force, net force, torque, and stuff like that. But again, compared to like what I had to do in undergrad, it is a walk in the park. How did I know that I wanted to get into PT instead of OT or AT? Okay, so when I started out in college, I was an engineering major, and I was like, this is 100% going to be what I want to do. And I got through my first year as a mechanical engineering major, and I took a couple classes relating to more of the engineering side of things. One was specifically like 3D design, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't like this. So then I changed to bioengineering. I figured out that I liked the bio and not the engineering. And then I started exploring options, and I was actually, funnily enough, between PT, dentist, and med school. OT or AT didn't really cross my mind, and I'm not too sure why. I just think that growing up, my parents are physical therapists, and I knew a lot of people in my life were PTs, so I had kind of an inside look to what that was like. And I knew that I had a program near me that was for physical therapy. I ended up shadowing a dentist, and I liked it, but I don't think that I would have liked having to like inject people and pull out teeth and do like more of the surgical type stuff. I like the cosmetic side of dentistry. And then for med school, I just kind of decided that I did not want to do school for the next like 4 years and then do residency for another 4. I just didn't want to do that. And that's how I ended up choosing PT. And I think another big reason was I'm really into like fitness and strength training, and I love the gym, and PT is basically like healthcare for the musculoskeletal system, so you get a really in-depth knowledge on all of that, and that is why I chose PT. Okay, the next question is, how much sleep are you getting? I feel like it's so hard to fit everything in plus sleep. Totally valid. Most nights I get 7 hours of sleep. Some nights it's 6, and then usually on the weekends I get like 8. I do go to bed pretty early. I have kind of like a grandma bedtime. I'll go to bed at like 8:30 or 9, and then I'll get up at like 5. I really try to prioritize sleep, but sometimes in school, when you're like in the thick of it, you have to sacrifice it a little bit, like for a day or so before an exam. At least that's what I've done. But I'm also not the person to stay up past like 11 cramming for an exam. Like once the clock strikes 11, or like once my brain cannot focus, I will go to bed. I will always prioritize sleep in those moments. Surprisingly, I'm getting a decent amount of sleep. Okay, someone asked for documentation advice if there's a framework on creating a solid assessment to follow. I actually don't have a ton to offer on this. My documentation skills are, you know, still happening. I've only had one full-time clinical, so I haven't had a ton of experience documenting. But I do, with the subjective, what I like to do is when I chat with the patient is like kind of write down bullet points of what they're saying, and then later I'll like go back and form it into sentences, or if I don't have my laptop, I will write down like little notes of what they've said, just because I have a hard time remembering sometimes, so I'll have little things to like jog my memory. And I feel like when you're looking at the assessment, just understanding what the insurance might be looking for and just noting any sort of functional improvement, because a patient might not think that it's like impressive that now they can brush their hair, but maybe they weren't able to do that a couple weeks ago, and you know, just like noting small functional improvement. But again, I don't have a ton to offer on that one, I'm sorry. Hopefully I will in the next year. Incoming PT student this fall, any tips on how to survive the first few weeks? Let me take myself back to when I started school, back in fall of 24. I remember the first couple weeks I felt like super overwhelmed, and I kept comparing myself to other people. I was like, oh, that person's studying a ton. Maybe I should be studying a ton. And I think you really just have to stay in your lane and like just focus on the next thing ahead. And for me, that was like quizzes. We had quizzes every week, so I'd like go home, I'd do my little note regimen, I'd like write out muscles, try to quiz myself on them, and then the morning of the quiz, I'd get up early, I'd study, I'd take the quiz, yada yada. You just really can't compare yourself to other people, and you have to give yourself grace and let yourself like get into a routine, because it's going to take you a while to figure out what study methods work how your exams are written, because every professor writes exams differently and you won't really know until after the first exam what to expect. So you really just have to give yourself grace in that regard, and you have to make time for things that you love, even if it feels like you can't. I still made time for the gym, for my family, for things that made me happy. You just have to make sure that you are making time for those things, because if not, you will go crazy. To start, you're either going to feel like you have to study all the time, or you're not going to know where to even start studying, so you may procrastinate. But my best tip is just to try and review the material like as much as you can, familiarize yourself with it, especially anatomy, because it's always going to come back. I have a bunch of like study tips on my accounts too. If you just scroll through, you can find them, and hopefully those can help too. But those are my best tips. And then just find people in your cohort that you get along well with, and you're going to make great friends. You all are going to get to know each other really quickly, because you're going to be going through this like difficult experience together. And they will be like your lifeline, because they will understand how you feel. The next question is, I just finished my freshman year. What is the number one thing I should do to prepare for PT school? Okay, so if you're interested in going to PT school, make sure that it's for you. I cannot emphasize this enough. Go shadow a physical therapist, an outpatient or inpatient. Get experience, whether you want to tech or, like I already said, shadow. But just make sure it's for you. Because as much as I do love the physical therapy profession, there are issues with reimbursement and insurance and debt to income ratio and whatnot. And that doesn't make it a bad profession to go into, but it just is something that you should be aware of in a sense, so that you don't come out of school with a ton of debt, which is why I again chose an in-state program. But I think the best thing you can do is make sure that you really want to do it, like know the career that you're going into and be confident in it. So shadow, get any experience that you need to have. And if your school is like a pre-PT program, you could join that. I feel like that would be helpful for applications. Keep your GPA up if you can, but most specifically your science GPA. So any sciencey class, that GPA is going to be weighted differently when you are applying, and your science GPA is almost like more important than your cumulative, because it's encapsulating all the classes that are similar to the ones you will take in grad school. So it's like a predictor of how well you're going to do. And then make sure you have hobbies outside of school too that you can talk about, that, you know, show your character, show your interest, maybe show why you'd be a good PT. But also at the same time, just enjoy college and don't stress too much about PT school. I mean, yes, you're going to apply eventually, and you know, you'll want to keep your grades up and like have good things to say on your application, but just enjoy undergrad, because grad school is a whole different beast. Okay, next question is, how do you deal with imposter syndrome? So I think when it comes to this, you just don't let yourself have it. Like if you feel the thought that like, I'm not good enough to do this, or I'm not good enough to be here, take over, shut it down immediately, because that is not true. You would not have gotten into PT school if you were not capable, and you know, you're on this path for a reason. Like I would have moments of doubt where I'd be like, like, is this really for me? Is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? But then I think back and I'm like, wait, I prayed so hard to be here. I talked to God about it. Like, I know this is a path. I just have to keep moving forward. And with anything in life, you're going to have days that suck, and you're going to have days that aren't easy, but it's like, how do you handle those days? Do you let them beat you down, or do you let them build you up? And do you allow them to help you become a better person, a better future clinician, and give you more problem solving skills? So when it comes to handling imposter syndrome, it's kind of just like nipping it in the bud and be like, hey, actually, you don't exist and I deserve to be here. Okay, the next question is, how are you able to juggle so many different topics? That is a good question, but I feel like thankfully in PT school, they all kind of mesh together, because anatomy kind of like relates back to everything. But I think my best tip for this is to have different like study methods for different classes, so that when you're studying for different things, you're kind of like switching it up and you're not getting bored. And also like, I do this thing where I feel like this is bad, but I like quote unquote sacrifice some classes. Like I think it was my semester I was taking neuroanatomy and like pathophysiology, and I don't remember what some of the other classes were, kinesiology, but like whenever I would have like neuro, kinesiology, or pathophysiology like in 1 week, I would like divide my attention up differently. I'd study the most for neuro, the second most for kines, and then the third most for patho, and I'd usually end up like cramming the morning of for that. And it still worked out fine, but I feel like when it comes to juggling different topics, you just have to figure out, okay, what exam do I have to study the least for, and what exam do I have to study the most for, if that makes sense. Okay, the next is, what should I do if I'm stuck between going for AT or PT, so athletic training or physical therapy? You should shadow an AT and shadow a PT. so you can get an idea of what their day-to-day looks like. Ask any questions that you might want to ask. You could look up their salaries if that's important to you. You could look up like job openings, job applications. I will say though, if you do PT, you are always going to have a job because I'm telling you, everyone is always looking to hire. Another thing to consider is maybe if you're interested in like travel PT. I don't think travel AT is a thing, but with travel PT you could definitely do that. And then also like AT, you're working with a lot of younger kids, athletes, and with PT you can work with people from all walks of life. You can work with pediatrics, geriatrics, neuro, vestibular, public health, so just depends on what kind of world you want to put yourself in. Okay, another question. Would DPT programs prefer allied health or applied exercise as in concentration? I really don't think it matters. I think it all comes down to, are you meeting the requirements of the program that you're applying to? Super simple answer, but genuinely I think you could choose either concentration, so I would just choose whatever you are more passionate about. What subjects do I have now in my second year? Okay, I've learned a lot this year, so let me go through and try to remember. Therapeutic exercise in general, and then I did therapeutic exercise for return to work and sport. I did musculoskeletal 1, so special tests and joint mobilizations. Currently I'm in medical imaging and pharmacology. I gotta get my iPad, I literally cannot remember. I also took a course on managing the injured runner. I took patient and community health, prosthetics, electrophysiology, physical therapy administration, so like starting your own business. I also took orthopedics, soft tissue, physical agents, wound care, and clinical judgment. So that was everything I took in my second year. Another question was, what subjects did I have in my first year? So let's look. There's a lot, guys. Okay, in the fall I took embryology, anatomy, physiology, and then just kind of like healthcare and an overview of physical therapy. In the spring I had kinesiology, exercise physiology, neuroanatomy, and then I also had research and pathophysiology. And then in the summer I had test and measures, so learning like GONI and MMTs, research, differential diagnosis, psychosocial determinants of health, and then acute care. Looking back, it's actually insane how many classes I've gone through. Okay, and those are all the questions that I had time to answer today. If you guys want to see another one of these videos, let me know, and see you in the next video.